recording the meeting, and there are individuals, citizens on the line who have called in. So we are doing full coverage for the community on this meeting due to the extreme importance of the emergency management team to roll out the information that any of you all have not heard, would like to hear, and also to open for questions and comments. The Mayor's Coffee is a time for us to listen and to learn. The council members enjoy getting the input. We meet in this way as an unofficial meeting to be more informal, to be able to just have an open discussion without all of the rules and regulations that are always in place in a formal meeting. So that's really the idea that the council has had for continuing these types of meetings. I would just want to make a couple of comments, and then I'm going to introduce the speakers today. The resources today are the advisory, the emergency management advisory team that the council approved. We have, I'll just introduce, we have Pat Rawlings, we have former Mayor Pro Tem Nancy Brittner, Jack Bowes, who are the three members of the advisory. We also have Council Member Bob Hambrick here as the representative of the Neighbor to Neighbor program that Pat had wanted to have input for the communications portion of the three areas of the advisory committee's charge. One was Pat's area that he just, the advisory group decided on their areas, but Pat is in communications and Nancy is handling citizen preparedness, and Jack is handling the issues relevant to the utilities and the electric, water, and such, that we need input from those three areas. Also, Brenton Lewis, our manager, will give us an update on the opportunities that the city has had to maximize state and federal resources in disaster response. So he'll give us an update on programs and the status and how we'll proceed in that area. I want to just read a couple of quotes, and then I'm going to turn this over to the individual members of the advisory committee and have input from any of you all who'd like to respond and bring information to the table today. So I thought it was really, really interesting. The American Red Cross Board sent us an opportunity, which I was going to share with the advisory group and any of the other council members and elected officials and people interested in emergency response and management. They sent out a very interesting opportunity for April the 19th. We'll post this on the e-blast on the website for a meeting to, and here are their goals. They state, the devastating winter storm that swept through Texas in February 2021 brought with it not only bitter cold, but also a bitter truth. Central Texas was not prepared. The good news is that we have the desire, expertise, and resources to restore disaster response capacity in Central Texas. This particular board of the Red Cross was looking at Hayes and Williamson, Travis. Basically, I believe that's their area for their attention and reaching out to community leaders to work with them. I'm particularly mention this because I thought that their description of the needs of a community and for leaders in the community, the types of activities and the mindset that we all need to have if we want to respond to these kinds of really important emergency circumstances. One, relationships are made when skies are blue and tested when they are gray. So now's the time to foster connections among those who can support response and resilience for Central Texas and for our city. Two, disasters are both intensely personal and profoundly universal, which means only those in a community can lead an effective response. And they can only be equipped to do so through expertise from beyond that community. So reaching out to resources available, state and federal, local. And three, nothing should be created for a community without the members of that community being engaged, which means all those we aspire to support should be included in the conversation and be a part of the plan around preparing for and providing that support. So I think we can take those comments and those quotes and understand that community leaders, especially here in Wood Creek, our city council, our other leaders here, are viewing community preparedness, response, and resilience as a priority. And for that, I will turn over to the advisory committee members if they have an introductory statement, or if they would like to reach right out to community for input.
Everybody keeps looking to the right, so I thought I'd look to the
Or
right.
if they would, or if they would like, I can.
Yeah. I guess I, oh, you want to start?
Okay.
Well, who
Jack.
likes to talk more, you or me?
Well, that's debate.
Yeah,
Well, you
I
can
better
take,
let you.
how about taking a vote as to which area that you'd like to hear from first?
I'll just be brief on this
Okay.
because we really are interested in getting your inputs. And as Pat told me the other day, I got too many damn facts rolling around in my brain right now that, I need to be cautious because we need time here to hear from you folks. But what I'm looking at, I'm Jack Bowles, by the way. What I'm particularly looking at are the events that occurred, the weather event related to the water system, the power system, and other utilities. And that we've had ongoing and continue ongoing discussions with the fire department here, other fire departments, water system, Wembley water systems, other water systems, Aqua, by the way, that's Essential Utility, just a little bit tidbit here, they changed the name. So we're gathering a abundance of information, as you know, sorting through this stuff, facts from fiction is a problem in itself. So without divulging a lot of information, because what we have now is really preliminary. It changes depending on who you talk to. So we got to qualify the answers we're getting. And for the most part, the people that organizations that we've been interfacing with have been really open. I haven't found any instances where somebody was trying to hide something, and that's of great value to us. Also, in conjunction with the water system, we're looking at backup generators and the promise for those. Just one little tidbit on the water system, just for your information. There's there's actually 4 components of that. The water tower, two wells, one at the tower, one down here at the end of Doolittle, and the waste treatment plant, which is off of 2325. So we've got a good information. We know how that system operates. And as any evaluation of an accident, a significant event like this, there's lessons learned. Why did it happen? What can we do to prevent it? And that's the way we're approaching it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my assistant over here.
Oh, you won't? Okay. My area is the communications part of it. And our communications, the last time we had a number of good emails come out, both right at the beginning and during the process of the event as it went along. One of the issues that we have, challenges that we have, is that I think there are only like 400 people that subscribe to these. And so you have to have another layer of communications trying to just get the people to ask for the communication if they can. And then we're also looking at other ways, both official and unofficially communicating the information out, where like the city will come out with an official communique and then other people can repeat it through whatever media that they choose to use. There are some new and innovative things we're looking at, but just like Jack said, and I'm Pat Rawlings, by the way. Just like Jack said, we have so much information and so many things to filter through and prioritize that we still haven't reached conclusions on exactly how to do that. And one of the biggest ways people communicate in a city of our size is just person to person. And so it's very serendipitous that the Neighbor to Neighbor program is coming along right as this event occurred. And I have some neighbors that do not check email, maybe do not have a computer, do not have a smartphone, probably all they have is a landline. And so you have to physically go pound on their door to make sure they are aware exactly what to do. So that is a whole nother kind of down and in manual communication effort that we're going to have to figure out how to deal with. And then in communicating all of this stuff, I started enumerating all of the different routes of communication. And if you put it all in there in a report where there isn't kind of a down selected or a prioritized part of it, people will just look at it and say, that's too much. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. So we're still filtering through all of this stuff and trying to figure it out. But I think it would be very helpful if Bob Hambrick would talk a little bit about the Neighbor to Neighbor and how it could be employed in a situation like this. Bob?
Thank you, Pat, and thanks for inviting me as well to talk about Neighbor to Neighbor a little bit. You talked about formal versus informal, and Neighbor to Neighbor doesn't get less informal than this. This is the bottom, the simplest way for people to communicate with one another, especially in times of extreme cold or extreme heat. Or, like I've said in the past, you need a cup of sugar. That seems overly simple, but it's not, because when we each know each other well enough, then we're also going to be concerned about each other enough that we're going to be willing to go to our neighbors, call our neighbors, whatever it takes to know that they're safe. And that actually started, I could model everything after what's already occurred with our ice storm, because all of the things that we talk about have already been done to a degree by certain people within the community. Whether they're knocking on people's doors, having them come over for 3 or 4 days to get out of the cold because they have no heat, rides to wherever they need. All of those things are what Neighbor to Neighbor is all about. And like I said, it's very informal as opposed to all the things that we could do with the internet. This is kind of a non-internet required type of activity. So if you're not here, I would appreciate it if you would email me. I don't know my email address yet, so I have to read it. It's actually bob.hambrick@woodcreektx.gov. And if you could email me, if you can't fill this out over the air. So, but email me and I will add you to the list, because what we're going to start doing is creating leaders for each little area, as small as possible. But also, what I would really like to see, and I think it's the hope of this group, is that we have 100% participation of all of the people in the city of Wood Creek. either as the people who get called or the people that call, either one. Or knock on each other's doors or whatever it takes so that we cover the whole city in knowing that people are taken care of. Thank you. So for the people here, if you haven't filled this out yet, it's simple. It's just your name, your address, your landline, your cell, your email if you have one, and then we can move forward. But in the next, I would say in the next 10 days, we'll begin to compile all of it and then start calling people and setting some things up so we can have a real organization. Yes, ma'am.
If we attended your first meeting.
I have it.
Bob, would you go ahead and announce that?
Which
Suzanne Gordon's question.
Suzanne Gordon asked if you were at the last meeting, which was on March 24th, and you filled out a sheet of paper like this, do you need to fill out another one? The answer is no. I already have it, and we'll take that and use it along with all of the flood of information that I'm going to get today.
Oh, and can I interject something else? I thought, does anyone have a sheet of paper that has the email address for input to us out there on the table? Okay. Whoever has a pen and a piece of paper, I'm going to read you the email address that we are soliciting comments through.
And Pat, you're on candid camera. For all those who have.
Oh,
are
and for
watching.
all of you people out in the greater world.
Yeah.
Okay. It's emergency management 07@gmail.com. And we are using this as kind of a one-way valve to collect information. We're not going to be responding to these emails, but it's kind of a suggestion box where people can send us ideas, comments. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. It is emergency, EMERGENCY, management, MANAGEMENT, 07@gmail.com.
07.
Right, 07.
Did I say zero?
You said, oh,
Oh,
I said 07 the first
I
time.
know you did.
Yeah, I was
You
thrown
want
by
to
the.
repeat it one more time.
Okay,
just for
one
the
more
record,
time.
And you're on the recording too, so
Okay.
enunciate.
Emergency management 07@gmail.com. Yeah, all one word, lowercase. Thank you. There's no dots in emergency management 07. There's no dashes or anything. It's just all run together.
Excellent. So, Ms. Brentner,
Emergencies arise from natural and man-made causes, and they can happen anytime, anywhere. So the best possible way to handle any emergency is, can you hear me? Can y'all hear me now?
Now,
Do I need to start over?
yes,
Okay, emergencies arise anywhere, anytime, and we need to be prepared for them. And that's really one of the bottom lines. The best possible way to handle an emergency is to have a kit. First of all, I want to thank Gail for bringing me some more information that she did some research on. I appreciate Gail Jones. Thank you so much. We do look at the email address to see what suggestions have made, and we've gotten a few, and I think that's wonderful. There are some things on the list that you might be surprised that you forgot about. For example, a hand can opener. Not an electric one, it won't do you any good. A hand crank radio. Different items. Each household is going to have special needs, whether you have children or pets. And your kit needs to be made of items that will help your family specifically. And you need to always keep it on hand in the good times, because when you need them, they're going to be there. I think that neighbor to neighbor lost my place here. It's going to be a great benefit as far as helping the neighbors. For example,
Yeah.
my next door neighbor has no computer and she still has a flip phone. She is not in the 21st century in the slightest bit, and nor does she want to be. So I try and fill her in on information. She does not get e-blast. She doesn't get anything because she doesn't have the capability. And I think that we've got several neighbors like that. And that's most important, that we look after our neighbors in our area. There's all kinds of websites you can go to look up this information. Of course, we're going to produce it all for you. Things you need to think about. How will I receive emergency alerts and warnings? Of course, we've already offered the e-blast in our text messaging service. We're looking into other avenues of notification. What is my shelter plan? For example, what is the tightest room in your home? Do you have a room in the middle of your house where you can shelter in place, which is usually the safest room in the house because it's the strongest constructed wise? What's my evacuation plan or route? If we have notice of something coming and it's not something we can stay here for, we need to get out. What is your plan? What is your plan? Everybody's going to have a different route since we only have certain ways we can go. And what is my family and household communication plan? If your cell phone's not working, I can use a perfect example. I have T-Mobile. John has AT&T. His phone worked the entire time during the snowstorm. My tower went out that's nearby here. I had no phone. So y'all need to have a communication plan. And if I'm at work and he's home, how am I going to talk to him? So we need to have a plan in place to where we can meet up. All kinds of different ways, and a lot of it's common sense. And that's all I have.
Excellent.
Let me just add one thing, a little bit of information. There were 535 water systems that went out in 135 counties. So I suspect there are a lot of cities doing what we're doing. So we're not the only ones sticking out. There are a lot of other communities, some large cities and some smaller ones than us that are encountering that same situation that we have here. Just a little bit of tidbit information.
Thank you. So I would like Manager Lewis just to give us the quick update on the opportunities for various financial mitigation programs, and then we're just going to open up for questions and any comments that you all have. We'll get right to that.
Basically, the federal government has introduced the American Rescue Plan Act, and the city is working with the Texas Municipal League and also the National League of Cities and monitoring the process to apply for funding. The National League of Cities has been in contact with the federal government. They expect guidance to come down on the funding and probably within the next 60 days. So we know what we can apply for and what the process will be. Right now, they're still talking about having the smaller cities still apply through FEMA, and the larger cities will get funding directly from the federal government. There is money there for the city of Wood Creek. We just have to figure out what we can spend it on. Also, we can apply up until December of 2024 for that funding.
So there are programs. It was predicated, some of this, on an immediate declaration of a disaster. So we not only had a disaster declaration for COVID-19, but we also immediately filed the notice of a declaration of disaster, which is a starting point for our cities. We must do that, and we did accomplish it. Now we're monitoring and moving forward, looking and paying attention to every potential we might have. I think we all know that there's discussion about how we want to spend the money or what we would spend it on. And I think that it's bubbled up to the very top that we need a generator, or generators are very important. So I think Manager Lewis had been talking about a generator at least 2 years ago. And constantly we've been looking for potential funds for a generator. I think this major disaster has again made that kind of bubble to the top of our attention. But of course, we need to analyze and see what are all of the options and what the community needs. So we'll open for questions, comments, anything that any of you all would like to discuss, or you could talk about your experience during the emergency, or ask any specifics about after. So we just are opening to the group,
Can
your
you come to the
comments.
mic, please, so we can hear you?
You guys don't be shy, you know,
Yeah, and
we're here to hear
This
from you.
mic works, Suzanne, and if you just want to be careful that it's long enough for you to carry it away. You can take it off.
More about the money
Okay.
Okay.
is my question. Did you say we've already applied and we already have?
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
because they have not
I
set the
was hoping.
guidelines yet.
Okay. And so how long do you think it'll be before you?
Well,
It's the
National League of
government.
Cities says it'll be about 60 days before we'll receive the guidelines from the federal government.
And this is coming through FEMA, you
This
said?
is, we will, it looks like we will be applying through FEMA for it
Okay.
because we're not a large enough city. We might be, they have not set the guidelines yet on how it will be, because it could be, we might have to go through Hayes County. We might have to go directly to the state. It just depends on how they set the guidelines for us.
And if we were looking as our target to be a generator, how much what could that mitigate? What could that fix for our when we have these problems? You know, is
Jack.
that,
We're talking two different generators. They're talking one for the office. That's one generator. And then the generator that we're also looking at, the options is one at the tower. They did have one there temporarily, and it kind of burned out. Whatever caused that, I don't know, and there were 2 attempts to bring others, but the roads were such impassable, they couldn't get them here. They did have a generator to waste water treatment plant. But that's the extent of that. They are we talk 2 different generators.
I think it's a little premature to discuss what we would do with whatever amount they give us when we haven't even applied for it yet. And we don't know what we're due. I just think that's premature.
Well, what I can comment on that, Nancy, is that even though we have not been able to apply, there have been surveys sent to us with options and requesting that we indicate our interest in specific areas.
Well, if that's
That-
the case, we need to just give them our Christmas list and send them on their way.
Which is exactly
That being
the
said.
idea. Yes, exactly, the idea. So the way these fundings work, if you don't take the steps in first that they require, then you're not going to be able to get it even in the queue, for it.
Okay.
So that's why
And
we,
that's
know.
an interesting question. The queue itself, is it like a traditional queue where the first people that get in line are the ones that, or how do they do that?
Well, on this, the act, actually, Wood Creek is eligible up to $374,000.
Mhm.
And it's actually earmarked for Wood Creek.
And so even if we didn't get in before some other small cities or something
Right.
like that, that would still be
It's
earmarked.
still available.
One thing we're also looking at is a siren for the area. We've got some suggestions, technically what that ought to look like. That was one of our first items. I don't know which one of these folks here suggested, but it's been augmented by other inputs. I just happened to come back from Fairhope, Alabama and Destin, Florida, little community, Point Clear. Both those places have sirens. I talked to the individuals that were staying at, and they're voice actuated. There are hurricanes down there, tornadoes down there. So, depending on the type of siren and what comes across the airway, they're alerted to what's happening in that area. So I did want to bring that up.
Wimberley has sirens in place ever since the big flood. And it's just a notification siren, like a tornado siren, to to let people know that the event's happening, they need to pay attention. We're also looking at additional communication. I'm sorry to steal your thunder.
No problem.
Uh,
I have no.
We have the text service, we have the e-blast, and I've requested that our staff looks into a phone service. Wimberley has the phone service. And it's not a reverse 911 because that's absolutely obsolete right now. To where no matter where our city manager is, he can put out a message to all the citizens that sign up for it. And that's the key. You have to sign up. A voice message. So it will get to our citizens that don't have the technology that most of us do.
And this will be in your report.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
these
yeah.
are,
Oh, yeah, this
Yeah.
is just kind of
Right.
teasers.
Those are kind of down in the weeds teasers
teasers.
that's the level of detail that we're
We're
getting
really
into,
digging deep.
but we aren't, because we haven't prioritized all of those different things, we haven't figured out what level of recommendation we have for those.
well, I just want to say that this advisory committee has just hit the ground running, and the amount of research and the work they've done is phenomenal. I just want to thank you all at this point, and they're just early on in the project.
Come on, somebody ask another question.
Questions?
I have two questions.
Judy, you can take that off if you want. The,
What-
not your shirt. The microphone comes off.
Oh,
You
okay.
can
I know. I'm fine. Thank you. The first question is, when all communication is lost, what is our next plan? When we have no internet, we have cell towers down, our home phones are without electricity, then what is the next plan of communication for emergency management? And my second question is, have y'all done any investigation because of the water issue that we were faced with and looking into rainwater collection? So that there might be a possibility, whether it's potable or not, people who failed or didn't know to fill their bathtubs could flush their toilets. So I'm wondering if y'all have thought of these things or if you've looked into these things.
Yes, I'm going to answer.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to answer yes, then I'll let you go. The water collection system is wonderful. We love that. We want that. But with our impervious cover rules, the city council would have to make adjustments to the ordinance.
And
Not-
one
not
other.
the ones like the little one that you water your plants out of. I'm talking about a 1,000-gallon system.
And we're even talking about some less conventional things that, like our house has a swimming pool. We never had any trouble flushing commodes. We have a 5-gallon bucket in a swimming pool. You get different people to sign up on a list that they have swimming pools and they wouldn't mind someone coming and harvesting some water out of their swimming pool. It would be handy to have another list of all of the 4-wheel drive vehicles in the city. And for people that could get around on the icy roads or who has chains. Let's see, what was the other?
And while you mentioned swimming pools, you know, the fire department would like to know where these swimming pools are located. The chief, of the Wembley Fire Department, in case they know where a few of them are, but they've got the capability of sucking out a 25,000-gallon swimming pool with no problem. So, you know, we gather that information and give it to the chief.
Yeah. Oh, and then the other part of the question was, what do you do when the power goes out and you don't have? Now, a number of folks had the batteries run down on their cell phones because they couldn't plug them in their houses. But if they have a car and it has gas in the tank, or even if it doesn't have gas in the tank, you can still go plug your phone in the car and put it on accessory, the little ACC on your thing, and it will charge the phone in a few minutes without drawing too much power from your battery. And as far as the city goes, there have been discussions about radios, walkie-talkies, things like that, but the individuals, it's going to be more of relying on what they decide they would like to do as a backup. So we will have recommendations of things that you can do, but it's going to be incumbent on those people to do those things themselves.
back to the rainwater collection, I was thinking more in terms of the city doing something, not individual homes, much like the golf course did to wash their golf carts.
How, is-
So I
how would
just,
that, how would that work?
well, I
if
mean,
you
we
put a
have a
rate-
building.
Yes, if we put a rainwater collection on city property up at the city hall, I'm assuming, what does that do other than let us go there and fill our buckets up? But if we can't get out, then we can't get out.
Well,
I
they
would-
did get
I
out
would
to
like
pick
to
water
see
up, though.
I would like to see us have the capability of putting in a small rainwater system in our home. That's why I said it would be a council action in changing the ordinance so that we could have something small, not massive. I'm not going to use my whole household on it, but for emergency use.
But
Is
as
my-
the
is my
ordinance is
understanding.
right now, I don't believe that rainwater collection counts as impervious cover.
The rainwater collection tanks have to be less than 100 gallons?
The rainwater
Yeah. Yeah, they don't, but most people are putting 100-gallon tanks on their homes.
They just have to be sealed.
So they do not count against impervious
A
cover. My
100-gallon
mistake.
tank isn't very big. You know, you can hardly brush your teeth on that one.
Well, it sounds like, Councilmember Brizendine, that the neighbor to neighbor program is what kicks in, next door neighbors, and is a next level. As you did, you had 4-wheel drive and got out and drove and brought me a battery pack, which was important because I didn't have the ability to use my car to do a plug-in. But that's a good thing to follow. And I see Cody's here, and of course, Cody was everywhere. We all want his vehicle that,
Hey,
At the
Cody,
time.
don't be bashful. There's a
Come on.
mic up here.
okay. So are there any other comments, or questions, thoughts? Councilmember Rasco.
I promised a neighbor I would ask this. It's not a huge deal, but she's one that has had just a lot of down limbs and brush and just big piles of stuff that was dealing with, and was asking if there was going to be another brush pickup. And I checked with the city manager, and it's like, okay, that was part of Waste Connections contract, and to do it again would be a charge to the city, obviously. And so the question is do other people have the same problem, and would we benefit to find a whatever it would take to do another brush pickup for folks after the freeze?
Thank you.
Can I?
Oh,
Let me
certainly.
address that.
Yes.
Our Waste Connections, they will pick up brush that is cut into 4-foot lengths, about 4x4 tied. So that and also, it happened in my house. I would just put it out by the curbside, they took it. And it's up to 8 bundles of debris, just so they can pick it up. So, there is that available to our residents at all times to be able to do that.
I think a lot of people don't know that, so maybe since you brought that up, perhaps we could advertise that to the community through an e-blast or a website notice. Yes.
During the height of COVID, that's true. But now they're back to their regular operations.
Yes, we can certainly do that. I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Jeff.
The-
Aurora, I had a question. Did you want to speak to that as well? Because you worked on, along with Judy, I believe, the contract.
We had, during COVID restrictions, the pickup of anything outside the barrels was suspended. In September, October, I, from my personal experience of having so many trees in my yard, I contacted Mr. Lewis about, can there be a relaxation because we're coming into a time our neighbors need it. There was an email from the city, a blast email from the city, letting us know that those restrictions were lifted and they would pick up outside items that were left outside the barrels within the scope of up to 8 bags
Right.
and in addition to that, up to 8 bundles. And I have not experienced any issues with them doing that or in my neighborhood they have been doing it. We heard of 1 or 2 cases and we contacted, city manager contacted the management to get some consistency. So if anybody is not having that kind of service, let the city know, because I know the city manager has contacted Waste Connections and that is to be corrected. But
And that-
8 bags,
And that's
8
per week.
bundles every week.
Is that per week? Right.
So
Yeah, I
is
do
that
agree.
8 bags and 8 bundles, or 8 bags
Yes.
or
Well,
8?
it's
8
8.
bags and 8 bundles.
So 16, you could have 16 items.
So if you
They
have,
usually try to keep it to 8.
yeah,
That's what I was
if
worried
you have
Combination.
items that are not suitable to put in a bag because they'll pierce the bags,
Mhm.
then you bundle them up and put them, they will be picked up.
And I do know that if you go over that amount, they'll wait till the next week. They'll
Yeah.
leave it out there. So,
Yeah.
but they will pick up to that level. And we will
Yeah.
send that information. It probably was lost in the
I,
shuffle of all of our emergency issues. I know we sent it out, but
maybe you can
we'll
repeat
send it
the
again.
last email.
Yes.
As long as I am here, and I spoke briefly to Bob, one of the things that concerns me the most in an emergency and is the situation that we have with persons with disabilities or elderly who are frail and we have shut-ins. They cannot leave their homes. And it was a beautiful test of neighborhood concern that in neighborhoods, we know who is in that condition, and we went to their houses and helped them. But I would like to, and I think this is perfect for neighbor to neighbor, to have a more formal identification of those individuals who will need further assistance than the rest of us. That is one of my primary concerns. They probably are not the type, well, some of them probably are not engaged in reading emails or social media. And that's one of my true concerns in an emergency situation.
And one problem in communicating with these people, I know an individual in the group that I'm supposedly involved with on Neighbor to Neighbor, that hasn't been formally all outlined yet, is a person that I took some water to his house and I knocked on the door and he wouldn't answer the door. And so it's kind of like, what do? You don't break in and make them drink water. You know,
Yeah, I
but
I
it's-
know, but that is-
there's got to be some sort of way to figure out how to deal with helping people that are either afraid or resistant to being helped.
Mhm.
Good point.
So,
Yeah.
You know,
Bob and I think the neighbor to neighbor would be a good vehicle.
You're
But-
saying basically a formal database for those particular individuals so that we can target them when we need to, whether it's extreme heat or extreme cold or any other emergency.
Thank you.
I can
Thank
tell
you,
you
Laura.
one thing that is important, and I'm going to go ahead and share this now, that people don't think about until it's too late, is revisit your insurance policies. See what it covers and what it does not cover. Because sometimes we think we're insured for certain things and we're not.
You know, we three aren't the smartest people on this
No.
planet,
We want your
but
suggestions.
damn near. I'm just kidding. But
They speak for
and
yourself.
so, you know, those of y'all that have got some specialties that would fall into one of these areas, email us. We want to know
Please.
who you are and we'll get hold of you. And seriously, we're really looking for inputs. I mean, we've canvassed a lot of places, but there are a lot of talent in this city. And I hope we can motivate you by coming forth and say, hey, I've got this area, my experience. It'd be very helpful.
Jane Little, did you want to make a comment? You just come up here and
Thank you so much for doing this. I've already got some great ideas, but just a couple of things. Is Aqua Texas responsible for providing emergency generators at the plants that would be inoperable if electricity goes offline? And why, if they don't have them, why would the city be providing them? I mean, I got that idea that the city's thinking about providing or paying for generators at the water tower. Why isn't Aqua Texas doing that? And secondly, rainwater collection works great. You can use decorative water barrels. If you want to drive by Wood Creek, we have several people who use them. I'm at 16 Wood Creek Drive. We had plenty of water to flush toilets during the emergency, and the water in the barrels doesn't freeze. So
How big you?
they're just, I have about, probably in all, maybe, I have eight or 10 barrels at different locations around the
Like
house.
55-gallon drum size?
Yeah. Lastly, I'm excited about having limb pickup. I think that was the item that I wasn't sure. I thought it was one time a year, but if the city, right now, I'm mostly cutting off dead plants and pulling up things, as I guess most of you are in your landscape adventures. So having that ability to put some of those out instead of trying to stuff them into the trash barrel is helpful. So thank you.
thank you. We'll answer go ahead.
Sorry, it just came to my mind. In the funding that we can apply for, is it possible for us to put together emergency bags that would include like batteries, flashlights, maybe a gallon of something that we could get out to residents, that the city could get out to residents?
Once we receive the guidelines, we can see if
Yeah.
that would fit that.
I did not see specifically in the descriptions of overall needs, that type of thing, but that doesn't mean it's not embedded in there in some
But
description.
my thought
but-
was when we were talking about, when Aurora was talking about elderly and shut-in,
Mhm.
is sometimes those people can't get out to get stuff. That could be something that we could put together, as Nancy said, as a kit that could be in every household so that there is a certain preparedness and it could be done. I mean, the volunteers could meet at City Hall or up here and put them together, and then we could distribute them, much like door hangers have been done in the past. So I
That's
just
a
thought
great
it might be
idea.
a consideration.
So you're thinking of
Brent, why don't you address the aqua question?
that's all I was just going to ask. Did you want to, or do you want
Oh, I'll address it.
That's above my pay.
Mr. Lewis?
Under the, our ordinances, they have to provide backup or standby power. They did have the generator. They hauled it in there. It failed. So, and so they did have two en route. I know one got wrecked on the way here. So, but they have the one that we were stationed for us was actually out at the sewer treatment plant they brought in. So they are required to have backup power for us. Now, there's other things too. That's under our ordinances. Under TCEQ though, which they also answer to them, is that since we have the elevated tank and our population base is below a certain threshold, they don't have to have backup power.
I'm looking at legislation.
Which is what? Both of them are true
Both of them
statements.
are true.
Yes.
So they did have the backup power as required by the ordinance, but by state law, they did not have to have it in the first place. But they did bring in the backup generator. So they did what they were supposed to. So I'm
Well,
sorry,
they met the ordinance requirements
with the backup
with
generation.
that, but they do not have to meet requirements with TCEQ. They're not required. But Karen,
I think it's when you break 1,000 connects,
What, the way,
And
a
we're
little
about
bit more
like 750, 800.
information. There's a distinction between elevated and non-elevated. As an example, Wembley water system has 6 tanks, but they're not elevated. They have 1.2 million gallons of water, where we have 125,000 gallons sitting in that tank. So during emergency, they only lost 30% of their water capability. So they essentially, by manipulating the water system, they had essentially full water during the whole time. All those of the 6, 4 of them are gravity fed. So, they didn't need power for those. And they did have rolling blackouts, and they have put an application in for the PEC. The way the TCEQ document says is, like I say, it brings it down to elevated, non-elevated. We're elevated. And it's the way they do it is 100 gallons per tap. We've got about 900 taps in Wood Creek. By the way, the water system here just supplies only the city limits of Wood Creek. And that other little place across the road, what is that?
Tully Court.
Tully Court.
Which is in the city.
And so that's it, and not outside this city. And so we fall in under that umbrella. You multiply 100 times 900, that's less than 125,000. So from the state standpoint, we've got 1 day of supply of water here. That's kind of the dilemma we're in now. But anyway.
Jane, did we get all your questions? Did you want to follow up or anything? Okay, thank you. Of course. Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of our water outage being extended was because the storage tank, which is 100,000 gallons, people continued to use it to flush toilets and everything and drained it dry before we got power back to refill it, right?
Well,
Is that correct or wrong?
What happens is they had rolling blackouts. And when you have a blackout, and some of them lasted for hours, that tank got almost depleted. And when that happens, depending on what well you surface it from, if you do it at the tower, it takes 2 hours to refill that tank. If you do it from the second well, it takes 10 hours. The problem is when the power goes out, then the freeze sets in, and the freeze hadn't set in. It takes a while to spool these pumps up, to get the water back up. With the power going out as long as it did, some of the lines, even though they were well insulated, they were aware that they're going to have low temperatures. So they re-insulated some of the more vulnerable lines and then wrapped them with what we call electrical cords, power cords, to add a little bit more, heat for the insulation. Of course, when the power went out, those things became useless. So we ended up with a number of frozen items and pumps, especially the one down on where you live, Judy, down in, what the hell's the name of that? city?
Doolittle.
I'm sorry.
In
But
Hampshire.
Doolittle. And so they had some lines that were broken. And in the generator situation's got to be fixed. They brought the generator on, and it takes 2 hours to get somebody to hook them up, electrically hook them up. And then when the power came back on from PEC, it took 2 hours to disengage that. You can't run both of them at the same time. And so that's unwieldy. They don't have an automatic switch. And so there was 4 hours there that aggravated the problem. So, and we're waiting on some recommendation. What Aqua's looking at this situation and assessing what they can do to improve backup power, and also the insulation, some lines, which one's the most vulnerable. Of course, this was a 125-year event. And, who knows, maybe we'll have a 150-year event coming up. So, but there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that are going on. And I'm reluctant, we're reluctant to spill it all out because some of it's going to happen, some of it isn't. The worst thing to do is throw stuff out. And then a few weeks from now, we got to correct ourselves. Well, you know how that happens on social media, you're killed. So we're kind of sensitive about what we're saying here, and without causing causing calamity down the road.
Do you all have any research or has anything, you haven't mentioned PEC today. So I just wondered if there's any comment about how
Well,
PEC.
let me say on the PEC, Wembley Water is put an application in for the dedicated circuit. The school system out here is on the dedicated circuit, and as explained to me, there's going to have to be a balance in which is more important, the school or water. And so that's up to, a negotiation there. And I assume we've asked Aqua. I didn't call them today. I meant to, forgot to, quite frankly, and see where they are with putting an application in for a dedicated circuit. If that happens, I mean, that's a big plus right there.
Good. Yes,
On something that
Mayor Pro
Councilmember
Tem.
Brissendine said. You may have already done this, but the Governor's Office of Emergency Management has very good resources, including some master plans for preparedness, communications, etc. Purchasing, and you can also get into subscribed, particularly for local resources. The funding for preparedness is a little bit tricky because of FEMA regulations. FEMA sometimes will say you have to have a disaster and you have to have a loss in order for you to get money or to get funding from us. And it's not a good plan. But some of the things that we used to do that were reimbursable by FEMA is get into some, when you know an event is happening, and it's usually several days in advance, you can begin to purchase and prepare because there is an emergency declaration or there is an event announcement. And then, since those are related to the event, most likely you will be reimbursed by FEMA at 75% match. So there will be like 25% local funding. If you go out now and purchase and store without something being, without expectation, without an announcement of a disaster, they will not reimburse. They will not provide the funding. So it is but all of that, if you work with the Governor's Office of Emergency Management, they will provide the resources and the advice. It's a good way to get funding, and they will help even with the FEMA reluctance sometimes to reimburse the state and municipalities. That's just
Well,
past
thank you. Yeah,
experience.
thank you. You know well that you know
gotta
well.
volunteer. You gotta volunteer.
Oh, I was just going to say, she's a professional in the area of,
We had to get
FEMA
18
reimbursement.
wheelers. Seriously, we knew a hurricane was coming. We had to have 18 wheelers full of water and park them in Houston. Okay. We couldn't wait for the hurricane to tear Houston down to give people water or things like that. So we would go out and go to HEB was our partner. So you can do it, but there has to be an announcement and expectation of a disaster for FEMA to reimburse.
You mentioned hurricanes, and this is kind of in Pat's area. He's developing a matrix showing the potential disasters that we could face here, from not hurricanes, but tornadoes, power outages. He brought up wildfires. Yeah, and those are things that can very well happen. He brought up an interesting one the other day based on something that happened in Houston. You have a tanker out here at this intersection where we've had one tanker and a concrete truck flip over, 18-wheeler, making that turn on the 12. We have a tanker over there with some bad gas in there, and that thing burst open. Then we got a problem here. So, we're looking at some extreme stuff, but stuff that could No, buy
Yeah,
yourself
as
that.
much as this was all triggered by the freeze, we're looking beyond just the freeze to every sort of emergency that could occur. And it reminded me the other day, I was sitting on Winters Mill headed toward the entrance, and I saw this big tanker truck just drive through the intersection. I snapped a shot of it, and I thought, what if that was filled with anhydrous ammonia, like the truck that flipped and crashed off the Pierce Elevated and killed 8 people and injured 200 other people, and they had to evacuate a 3-mile radius. So,
Well, yeah, when I think some of you would remember when they actually built the loop, that the idea was that they didn't want these trucks going through Wimberley because of the dangers.
but they still do.
Yeah, they
You
do.
folks way in the back, you haven't said anything. You got something you can say?
That's who gave me the.
She
He just putting you on the spot,
Oh,
Gail.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize.
Gail.
Hey,
Gail presented
super, thank you.
written materials to
Yeah.
the committee.
You brought your driver with you, right?
So any others who'd like to make any comments? or-
Jeff, you're awful bashful today.
Yeah. He talked about the trash pickup, which is, we've gotten that straight. Thank you.
If anything, just to thank, all y'all for stepping up and doing it. I mean, we had a lot of conversations, online during the freeze, and to see this come to light is very encouraging. And looking forward to hearing what the report has to say, and then moving from there and go on neighbor to neighbor.
Well, we got a shortened time, 60 days, half of it is already gone, but we did that deliberately. It makes us work harder.
Yeah.
And we also, this is not just the 3 of us coming up with all of this information. There has been informal discussions that we had before and during this where we're just getting on the phone with people we know that know stuff and say, well, what about this? What do you think about this? And just trying to get as much
Well,
information from people in our community as possible.
Well, again, I think the priority of the community engaging in this process, has been something this committee has specifically addressed, and it's very interested in continuing to research and hear from you. So pass it around, the information around to your neighbors and friends, and let them know to call Jack and Nancy. And
Yeah, well,
Pat,
and I
and-
did post the email address on Nextdoor. So if you go look in my post, you'll see that email address in Nextdoor.
that's right. And Bob, of course, thank you.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that he's working on numbers of emails and my streets to schedule another meeting. So we do have kind of an interesting meeting planned. I'll just mention if we're kind of through with this part, I'll bring up Parks and Recreation will be meeting in a bit and today. And so we do have a plan to have an evening event starting at 6:00 on Earth Day. And I believe that's the 22nd of April, and it will be at the golf club. The highlight for that meeting will be Parks and Recreation and Trails, and to discuss any other items that citizens would be interested in. But we'll have be an open bar there. I believe
An open
that's
bar.
a host, a no host, sorry, I correct that for the whole world.
Leave the water at home.
I bet we get a good turnout for that.
Yeah,
Wait till
an
that
open
gets on
bar.
social media.
Do we have funding for that? Yeah. Well, a hat, a love offering.
Yeah.
So we will have refreshments provided by the camp. We'll be providing that for us as well. So that's just going to be kind of an evening event that will hopefully bring in those that perhaps can't meet during the day. And
Do you have
like
the
to-
time of day yet?
6:00.
6. okay.
Yes, and it's confirmed with the golf club, with the golf course, and confirmed with Mr. Ross here. Is Danny here?
Danny's, he's out working.
Okay, well, I was just going to thank the camp again for Camp Young Judea for hosting us here and for providing our refreshments and just being, so accommodating, to the city of Wood Creek. We have refreshments, breakfast tacos, brunch time, lunchtime. Please help yourself if you all would like to do that. We don't have a Parks and Rec until, is it 1? 1 o'clock. So I hope to see some of you there or all of you. In the meantime, we will adjourn. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.